So, Frank, we'll start with a bit of introduction of yourself. Thank you. I run this knowledge series mainly as a, you know, not a very formal conversation, but just to share experiences of industry experts and practitioners of what they're seeing in cyber. I think cyber is in everyone's mind nowadays. So that's the whole thing. So we'll start with a little bit of introduction, but I would love if you can tell us a little bit of history of your experience being in the armed forces. I saw you spent 23 years. So
Yeah,
I'll hand over to you, and if you could do a quick intro and give us a little bit of insight of what happens on that side of the fence, that will be very
sure.
interesting to our audience.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. Yeah, so like I said a little earlier ago, I grew up in New York, born and raised in New York. Lived there until I joined the Air Force when I was 21. I was one of those guys who I didn't join straight out of high school. I didn't join straight out of college. I was kind of in between when I decided to join. And my initial thoughts were to do 4 years and kind of that's it. I can't do any more than that. But I joined and I enjoyed myself a lot more than I thought I would. It was a great time. 23 years of doing anything is a long time. 23 years in the armed forces is a, it felt like double that some days. Yeah, but it was great. And I had an opportunity to travel the world. I never got a chance to go to Australia, or I've never been to Australia. Just a quick side story. One of the places that I was stationed when I was young was Korea. I was in South Korea, and I was a very young man, and I didn't, I wasn't what I would call a very smart guy. And so I say that because I had an opportunity. So when you're on an Air Force base or any military installation, oftentimes there is a group of people who their sole job for the military members is to do things like plan trips and do activities and all that kind of thing, right? So I'm in South Korea. I was young, single, didn't know any better, and I have opportunity for $700 to fly from South Korea, spend a long weekend in Australia, and that price for $700, that would have included the airfare and the hotel. All I would have needed was to come up with extra money for food. And so, I wasn't making very much money back then, and I thought, man, $700, that's quite a bit of money. That's quite a bit of beer that I cannot drink if I go to Australia. So I didn't go. So fast forward to my age now, and I'm like, dude, I was halfway there, and I'll never get to Australia for $700, right? Never ever. So it's still definitely on my to-do list. But while I was in the Air Force, I did a lot of things. I started out in logistics, did that for a little while, and then I made the switch into what we called back then information assurance. It's turned into cybersecurity. But that really began my journey. I didn't really know anything about it when I joined the military. I was kind of new to it. And another great thing about the military is they don't really care about your past experiences because they're gonna, train you from head to toe. And so I went through a series of classes and continuing education. I eventually got my degree in information systems, and it kind of just took off from there. And so I did that for about 18 of my 23 years. And it was great. I love being in cybersecurity. I love the challenge of it. I love the differences that happen every day. And so, I eventually, like I said, did 23 years and I retired. And we say retired from the military, but obviously I'm still working. But I continue to do it. So I retired in 2018. It's about 5 years now, which is crazy to think about. And I'm still in the cybersecurity space. So I'm either, that either means I'm smart for doing it that long, or I just have no idea that there are other things to do in life.
There's a lot of people from the armed forces and the police forces, local police forces, who've had experience in fraud and crime and have moved into cyber crime and cyber fraud and online fraud and moved out of that into the commercial world, and they bring a lot of wealth of experience, right? Because what you see on that side of the fence is very rare, and I think that's gold what you have in place. And I think what sparked my interest in having you on our knowledge series is last time when you and I were speaking, we spoke about things like, how businesses struggle to define risk, right?
Mhm.
And this morning too, we were having this conversation that, oh, there's been so many breaches in Australia, businesses may be spending millions of dollars in cybersecurity. Well, a few businesses are, but it's still not, come home to many organizations, right? And I
Right.
think that sparked my interest in having you on this. So essentially, what I would like to, for you to share, obviously nothing, no intellectual property or any such thing. We're talking in general about businesses and looking at risk, but a lot of businesses are good at looking at business risk, but cyber risk is also a business risk. And
Yeah.
how do you quantify? What's been your experience? Can you share the challenges you have seen in the last 5 years being in the corporate world and the 23 years of experience seeing things from that side of the fence, and let's start the conversation around the whole cyber risk and what it means to businesses and how are you dealing with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do remember that conversation. I've been in cybersecurity or information security, whatever you want to call it, for long enough to have seen the evolution of our industry, right? And so when I first started, back in the early 2000s, late 90s, whatever, security was definitely, we were the party of no, right? Hey, I want to go do this. No, you can't do that. Hey, I want to connect these two systems. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. And so for a long time, what happened was then people started going around security because we were just seen as a roadblock. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because really up until like the last at least 10 years from my experience, maybe a little bit longer, we've shifted the conversation to just that. It's about risk management, right? It's about recognizing and reducing the risk to a tolerable level. Now, no, everyone knows we can't. It's very difficult to have zero risk in any endeavor. Whether that's business related, whether that's personal, whatever, right? Zero risk is impossible, virtually impossible. And so I think again, as an industry, as individuals, we've gotten a lot better at going to those. I'll speak for it from a business perspective, at going to those meetings and continually reminding people that the business runs not just because we're making a dollar, right? The business runs because we're also saving a ton of money, and that's kind of where I see cybersecurity, right? I'm not in the I don't work for a software company, right? I work at a vehicle manufacturing company, right? We make our battery electric vehicles. So my cost center, my team, right? I'm not adding a dollar to the bottom line necessarily, but what I am doing is reducing our ability or reducing our risk of not losing a dollar every day, right? And that's kind of how I see it, right? So what I've been trying to do, and I need to get better at it. I think everyone in this space needs to get better at it. Is really sort of being able to contextualize cybersecurity to business terms, right? I mean, you always hear that. It's far easier to speak in business language than it is in IT language. And quite honestly, I think that's an unfair thing to say that everyone in cyber, everyone in IT just automatically needs to be able to speak business language. I think the smart business people, right? The smart C-suite, they are starting to lean into IT a little more, and they're starting to lean into security a little more, and they're getting a little bit smarter, which is great. But the truth is, I do need to be able to articulate it in a manner that speaks to cost savings, increased market share, competitor advantage, risk reputation, and so what I've been trying to do, and what I want my team to do, again, is to be able to pick out, why is, for an example, why is a potential fish email, why is that a risk to the company, right? What happens to that? And being able to take a very sort of complex, nebulous thing and reduce it, to if I was going to create a PowerPoint presentation, no more than a half that slide I need to be able to articulate why a fish, one single fish might be impose a huge risk to our company. And so that's, that's something that we're learning, I think, as an industry. We're getting a little better at it. I've had the fortune of working with some young individuals who are going through their undergrad and their graduate degrees in cybersecurity specifically, and risk is really being hammered now. There's whole sections about governance, about risk, about tolerances. So we're definitely headed in the right direction, in my opinion.
I want to dwell a little bit more on the saving a dollar, right? Not making a dollar, saving a dollar. So, I'm sure you've done business cases, and I've done quite a few in my lifetime, right? And I still remember, at least in Australia and other parts of the world where I worked in Asia and others, when you write a business case, the first option is do nothing, right? Just keep status quo, right? So then you have a second option and a third option, and then you have a recommended option of one of those 3 or 4 options you have, right? And I still remember doing this, this perceived expense, right? Because cyber is seen as, oh, I'm spending this money because I may get hacked, or because I may get fined, or I'll have to make a payout to the bank because there was credit card loss, or I had to make a. So this is a perceived risk, right? To some degree there is a. So what concepts have you used to demonstrate the actual? So when the person who holds the treasury, mostly it's the CFO, before he signs off, what are the magic words or numbers you put in front of him to say, yeah, okay, I approve the budget?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. So right, everything IT related, we need to have some sort of ROI calculation, right? Which can get difficult when you're just in the business of saving money. So what I like to do is I like to leverage my cyber insurance company. I like to leverage organizations like Gartner or something like that, or Accenture, one of those big guys. Having conversations with people who are in the industry, because that risk of a payout, that's a real thing, right? That's a real tangible thing. We've got evidence after evidence after evidence of such and such company got ransomware and it cost them X millions of dollars. When it comes to things like that that are a little bit intangible, right? It's a little bit of a guess. Then I just go to sort of industry standards, and try to find the best statistics that I can, right? Luckily, knock on wood, I've not experienced a newsworthy breach in any of my organizations that I've been in, right? So I haven't gone through sort of those calculations from a firsthand experience. So again, I'm going to have to leverage sort of these companies that are that's their sole purpose in life, is to come up with these numbers.
Yeah, I've used the Poneman Institute's reports, right, which says the average cost of a data breach is 3 million or 4 million. I think this year it's jumped up to 4 million, and I like a specific number they use. They say for every record you lose, so let's say name, date of birth, or credit card details, or whatever, every line of record you use, they say the average cost per record is, I think from memory it used to be 150 to 250 US dollars per record, right? And then I would do a simple math saying, okay, you have how many customer data points do you have? This client say, okay, I've got 1 million records. So I say, if you lose 10% of that 1 million and you multiply that by $150, that is your cost of a data breach, which could be, run into millions. And then defining that $150 is, it's paying customers back money, class action suits, public relationship, communication with media, remediating the vulnerabilities. All this mounts up to that number, right? They break it down to what does it cost per record. That's some numbers I've used. And sometimes I've seen some companies, they say, oh, don't worry about it, we got to do this, and then suddenly money comes from everywhere.
Everywhere.
Nobody wants. And we spoke about it. The moment a breach happens, nobody's looking at ROIs or nothing. money comes
Yeah.
from God knows where. Like suddenly
Yes.
approvals happen overnight, and then suddenly you're flooded with budgets to
Yeah.
fix. And I
It's
still remember
amazing.
when it's amazing. Yeah, I still remember Equifax when they had the breach. I've heard stories of like they have three socks now, right? One
Yeah.
checking over the other and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
just
I read
imploded
that they
the.
yeah, I read that they spent about $1 billion over like however many years on their cybersecurity since that breach. That's quite an investment, one of the things I've been also doing is I've been partnering with my HR folks, and I'm getting generalized salary bands. And so I'm trying to start putting in how much is it going to cost just from non-work production. It's we have a manufacturing plant, so that's a little bit easier to sort of gauge, right? If my plant is down, well, okay, it's X times dollar amount per employee. That's cool. But when you get into the corporate world, it's a little bit different because I can still work without a network, but I can't do everything. So it gets a little bit nebulous there. But so I'm trying to work with HR to figure out sort of a standard mathematical calculation to add into those as well, because I
What's the
think that
cost
will
of
resonate.
lost business or lost manufacturing
Yeah,
time or
lost
lost
production.
production time? But that's a very important point. A lot of businesses see, I think the challenge is, businesses don't realize the value of data. Now,
Mhm.
when they don't understand the value of data, the next thing is, so I've had CXOs tell me, oh, if we had a breach, we can still operate. I'm like, sure, but how? Oh
Right.
yeah, we will just use our mobile phones, right? Okay, so and this example was a manufacturing, and I'm like, what can you define what you mean by a breach? Oh, if you have a phishing email, I'm like, no, no. What if you had a ransomware attack and all your data was encrypted, all your
Yeah.
systems were encrypted? Could you operate your business, right? And I think the answer was still yes in that instance. And it's like we have some C-level execs who are still saying this is not my problem. I'm a very low risk business. Hackers are not interested in me. And I think that misconception, has to change over time. Otherwise, we will always be floating in this space that I'm too small and I'm least of a target, right?
Yeah.
So that's something I've seen quite a bit happen in the market too.
Yeah. No,
But I
I
liked
agree.
your example of production time lost. That is a very powerful metrics, even though if it not be as accurate as you can imagine it to be.
Sure.
But and I'm sure production plants may be using a lot of robotic equipment and stuff, and all that is connected back to your network and your IoT devices and stuff. If they stop operating, how will it impact the business, right? And that's something you need to consider, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's wherever I can find what I think will be a valuable metric, I'll do that. And I also don't pad the stats, right? Meaning I don't want to get in the game of fear, and I don't want to get in the game of just scaring you, right? I don't want to do that either. I don't want to sell you on needing security because you're scared. I want to sell you on security because it's good for the business, right? It's good for the company growth. It's good for, again, all the things that we talked about at the topic. And so I don't, if I think this is only going to cost us, X hundreds of thousands of dollars, then I'm going to say that, right? I'm not going to pad that to go, oh, this might be a $3 million loss, when in reality it's 300,000 or something like that. I think that's happened in the past. Like we exaggerate to try to move the needle. I think that that's being disingenuous, and I wouldn't be a part of that myself. Not saying everyone's doing that. I'm just saying we need to be as factual as possible, because if you think about all business cases, whether it's marketing, bringing a business case to senior leadership, or whether it's HR, they need to be pretty crystal clear, right? They need to be pretty on point with their numbers and their figures and all that stuff. And so why wouldn't security be held that same standard? And I think that actually, that level of transparency when I'm talking about those things, I think people appreciate that. They don't think I'm trying to just like I said, pad my stats just to move the needle. At the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, it is a risk calculation, and it's not for me as the head of information security to blindly accept risk on behalf of the entire corporation. That's not
Correct.
That's not my job, right? My job is to represent those risks and say, this is what we can do, and if we don't, to your point, right, do nothing. Recommendation 1, 2, and 3. And if they don't want to do any of those, if they want to do nothing, thanks, sign here, please. If you get it's hard to get that signature, but that's how it should work, right? And so I think that again, the industry is changing where that realization is known a little more, right? I think you could look back, again, maybe in the 2010s or something, and you saw CISOs getting fired left and right for any sort of breach, and that slowed down a little bit, right? I mean, unless there's some egregious sort of mistake that slowed down, because people are understanding that this is a shared responsibility, right? I may be tasked, I may be the head of information security, but 100% this is a shared responsibility.
I was just about to ask you that question because I ran a poll yesterday it's still live, so feel free to jump in and put your vote. So I ran a poll yesterday saying I've seen a lot of videos on cyber is everyone's responsibility, right? Literally the word is everyone. And I've seen videos, posts on LinkedIn, and I'm like, but nobody's talking about who's accountable, right? You can't have everyone accountable and responsible. Because then the finger pointing will come in. But there's always needs to be. So I gave options: CIO, CISO, CEO, and board. I gave 4 options, right? And I would like to get your thoughts on it while I'll pull up the post so we can have a look at what the current stats looks like on that. Yeah. What's your thought on it?
I did see it, and I participated in your survey.
Oh, did you? Oh, sorry.
I did. Okay. I did. No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk about that. So, from my perspective, I think it's the board's response. I think it's the board who's accountable. Because, and I say that because they're the ones that ultimately control the money. They're ultimately the ones that control the purse. Now, the CEO obviously has a big say in that. I think the CIO. I think this is a good list, by the way. I think the CIO really shouldn't bear much responsibility unless it can be easily proven that CIO specifically said to the CISO or whatever, no, you can't do that.
But see, responsibility can lie. See, the question is who's accountable, right? Ultimately, who's accountable, right? True. Responsibility may lie across all levels, including, the receptionist, for example. Because, if he or she at the reception clicks on a link, that could cause a phishing event, right? So everyone is responsible. But my question is, who's actually accountable to this, guys, right? Who's the ultimate, where does the buck stop? That's what is the powerful question we have to ask.
Yeah. And I voted for board. I do believe in the board because, ultimately they have the power of the purse. And so, again, I can make the most intelligent, articulate argument for why I need to spend X number of dollars to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. And they could say, no, that's not important this quarter. That's not important this year. And they might have a very good reason, right? I'm not justifying their reasons.
Yeah, so they could accept as you said, they could accept the risk, right? I've been in meetings where we have done a penetration testing, risk assessment, vulnerability assessment. We've done red teaming, and we've shown all the rest. And sometimes the business says, yeah, that's fine, but we're going to accept that risk and we'll carry it, right? We may have some mitigative measures for it or, some compensating controls, but we're not going to spend, $1 million in a biometric, check-in, check-out system or access control, right? We'll have a manual register where we'll make sure people sign in and sign out, right? You could have a control. See, this is where I tell clients, you could go get $1 million access control with privileged access and identity access and all these complex solutions. but do you really need that, right? Or can
Right.
you do with some other kind of a control and still meet that requirement, right?
Right.
And for a small business, they may not need to invest in a complex solution, but for a large business, they will need, because if like your business is over 1,000 staff, how do you manage, who is coming in, coming out, who's inside your network, who's at your perimeter, who's coming in as a third party. So you would probably need some automation and some level of sophistication there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think this is where the industry is confused. They think, oh, cyber is expensive. Yeah, but you need to know where to spend that money, right? And how to
Exactly.
allocate those funds.
Right. No, that's exactly true. Right. You don't need to spend $1 million to solve a, $500,000 problem. Right. That doesn't make sense from a business case. And so that sort of gets back to, again, what we were talking about earlier. I think my job too is also, in not trying to scare everyone. I need to understand, I need to put some sort of dollar amount to that risk so that I can say, okay, this is why I want to spend X dollars to reduce this risk, right? Again, I don't want to spend $1 million to solve $1,000 problem, which is a little bit different approach, and maybe I'm going off topic a little bit, but it's a little bit of different approach to when I was in active duty Air Force, right? The level of risk acceptance is very low in certain circumstances where it does justify the spend for a very low probability of something happening, right? But in the business world, that's a legitimate concern, right? If it's got a low probability of happening, even though it might have a very high magnitude of effect, okay, let's accept that risk and move on, right? And if it happens, it happens, and we'll figure it out. I think people in cybersecurity need to get a little bit better about that. I think part of it, we take it a little bit personal. I recommend this whole slew of tools, and we're going to be high speed and automated everywhere, and it only costs $10 million. And then they go no, and we're like, they don't like me. No, it's
They don't
not.
value my judgment
Right.
or
It's
my
not personal
opinion.
at all. Yeah.
I know I have been across certain scenarios like that where, like, sometimes it impacts me too. Like we are trying to do the best to help our customers too, and sometimes we say, well, it's going to cost you X, and they're like, oh, this is all it's just a vendor trying to make money kind of thing, right? And I'm like, it's yeah, you can have your opinion, and if there's someone else willing to do it for a cheaper price, fine. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's going to cost you something. And we talk obviously from our experience, and others have. It's like a doctor tells me, "Oh, you've got cancer, you need to get operated." I know a number of people who have chosen not to get operated, right, and they have recovered through alternative medicine, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and some unfortunately didn't recover, right? And it's do you have the skill, the time, the patience to learn and understand and do it over time, and do you have the time to actually do it, and not get breached or not lose customers? We've seen clients lose customers because they chose different alternate methods, which unfortunately didn't work right for them. So
Right.
wonderful. Any last thoughts for our audience, Frank? What do you see as the future? What is 2023? In fact, you are our first person we are interviewing for 2023. So so that's a
Nice.
good start.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
So anything
Um,
for 2023? Any forecast or anything you want to share with
yeah,
our audience?
I would remind anybody who's in this space, whether you've been in it a long time like we have, or you're coming new to the space, we need to get better about representing security as a journey, right? And that might sound, again, to you and I as sort of like, yeah, of course, but people don't understand that, right? And people don't understand that security, even though 95% of the time it falls in the IT team, right? The overall IT team, IT operations and security, like for example, you could be rolling out some system in IT operations, and you got a definitive start and a definitive end, and cool, it took 10 months, whatever, but in security, it's a never ending journey, right? Because even if we got all these tools in place, it's great. The threat landscape changes, something new comes on board. And so, I think just as an industry, again, we just need to get a little bit better about keeping that at the forefront of our conversations, reminding the C-level folks, hey, we're never going to stop trying to get better at security. And unfortunately, it's got a cost, right? And eventually the cost will come down and level off a little bit, of course, but there's always some sort of something new. There's some other threat that we just didn't know about this year, but it's new for next year. And we don't have any tools in place, or we don't have any, any FTE in place that understand this. So that's one thing I would say, and then another thing I would say is that, just sometimes cybersecurity is a difficult field for people because there's no, to my first point, there's no definitive end, right? How do you define success? At the end of the day, how do I go home feeling great about what I did today? And I would just say to people, find whatever that means for you. Whether it's, how many alerts you addressed today, or how many meetings you're on, or whatever. Find something that makes you happy about your accomplishments for the day, because it sometimes can be pretty difficult. We're constantly fighting fires, or we're constantly fighting the bad guys because the wave doesn't stop. We just need to feel a little better about, you're doing a good job. People don't say that enough to people with security, right? Like, I was like, oh, you didn't get breached today. Congratulations. Said no one ever. I've never heard that in 23 years, 25 years, right? Like, hey, good job not getting breached today. So, that's my two-party.
And if you get breached, then it's like all hell breaks loose. What have you been doing all these years?
Yeah, what have you been doing? Yeah. I'm spending all this money. What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, somebody got through the side door, which was not monitored, and you didn't give us budget to monitor the side door.
Right. Or nobody told us there was a side door. Right?
Shadow IT, yeah, I know.
Yes, exactly.
Frank, I wholeheartedly thank you for making time through your busy schedule. I know you've got a big remit ahead of you in this role, and it's been a pleasure knowing you, and wish you all the best for 2023. And happy to keep in touch. And Arya will let you know when this recording goes live. And thank you for your time. I wish you all the best.
Yes, thank you for having me.